Welcome to today's lesson on comparing fractions, decimals, and mixed numbers. What if I asked you to compare these four numbers and order them from least to greatest? Do you think that you'd be able to complete the task? Well, in today's lesson, you're going to learn how to order numbers from least to greatest that are decimals or fractions or mixed numbers. When you are trying to compare numbers, the first thing that you need to do is make sure that they are all written the same way. That means that you need to turn all of the numbers into decimals or all of the numbers into fractions. And that way it'll make it easy for you to compare. So we have 1 and 3/10, 1 and 1/4, 98 hundredths, and 4/5. Those are the four numbers that we're trying to compare. So the first step that we're going to do, we are actually going to turn our fractions into decimals. And that way all four numbers will be written as decimals, and then we can just follow the rules for comparing decimals. So let's start with our mixed number 1 and 1/4. To turn 1 and 1/4 into a decimal, we need to focus on the fraction. The whole number is actually going to stay the same. So if we were to rewrite this number, we would rewrite it as 1, our decimal, and then whatever we change this fraction to as a decimal is going to go right here to the right of this decimal. So you may remember that in order to change a fraction into a decimal, you actually need to divide your numerator by your denominator. So let's walk through that pretty quickly here. 4 cannot go into 1, so we are going to put a 0 as a placeholder and make sure we put that decimal in. 4 can go into 10 2 times. 4 times 2 equals 8. We subtract out and we get 2. So now we're going to go one more place value over. 4 can go into 20 5 times. 4 times 5 equals 20. And there we go. We are all zeroed out. So 1/4 is equivalent written as a decimal as 25 hundredths. So that means that we would rewrite 1 and 1/4 as 1 and 25 hundredths. And if you think about it, if we were to look at this as money, $1.25, 25 cents is a quarter. And we say this fraction as a quarter. All right, let's go ahead and look at 4/5. Now before we look at 4/5, I'm going to go ahead quickly and erase our board here so we have some space to work with. All right, so we are going to now change 4/5 into a decimal. Once again, you divide your numerator by your denominator. 5 cannot go into 4, so we need to have a placeholder and a decimal. 5 can go into 40 8 times. 5 times 8 equals 40. And hey, look at that. That was pretty quick. We're all zeroed out here. So that means that 4/5 is equivalent to 8/10. I'm going to write that as 8/10 here. And so we now have 1, 2, 3, 4 decimals. All of our numbers are written as decimals. So now we're ready to compare these numbers. All right, let's go ahead and compare these four decimals. Now, as you can see, we have all of the decimals lined up for each of these numbers, and we're going to compare them from least to greatest. So we are going to have four numbers written here from least to greatest. So we'll make 4 spaces here. And let's start with the greatest column. So in order to find the greatest number, or the largest number, we are going to start with the furthest place value to the left. So in this case, that's the ones place. Now, 98 hundredths and 8/10, they don't have anything in the ones place. So you can put zeros in the one place if you want. But we have two numbers that both have a 1 in the ones place. So that means that we actually need to now move to the next place value to decide which one of these numbers is larger. And since 1 and 3/10 has a 3 in the tenths place, which is larger than that 2, that means that 1 and 3/10 is our largest number. So now I'm going to cross that out. And our second largest number is going to be 1 and 25 hundredths because it's the last number, the only number that's left that has a 1 in the ones place. And I'm going to cross that out. All right, so what's our next largest number? Both of these numbers have a 0 in the ones place. So we move to the next place value over, which is the tenths place. And since 98 hundredths has a 9 in the tenths place, that means it's larger than 8 tenths, which only has an 8 in the tenths place. So that makes 8 tenths our smallest number. And that's it. That's all you have to do to compare these numbers from least to greatest. Now, there are some exceptions where you may not have to go through that entire process. For example, if I were to ask you which number is greater, 1/100ths or 9/10ths, you wouldn't have to go through all of the mathematic processes. Think about it. 9/10ths, that's only 1/10 away from 1 whole. 1/100th is 99 hundredths away from 1 whole. This number is very close to 0. This number is very close to 1. So it would make sense that 9/10ths is larger than 1/100th. Also, if you have a number that has a power of 10 as the denominator, then you can easily change that into a decimal by place value. We know that 9/10ths is also written as a 9 in the tenths place. And if we were to compare these two numbers, 9/10ths is larger because 1/100th has a 0 in the tenths place. Let's review what you've learned in today's lesson. When you're comparing numbers that are written differently, maybe as a mixed number, fraction, or as a decimal, it's important that you find some way to be able to compare them. Now, you might be able to compare them just by looking at them. For example, 1 1/3 has a 1 in the ones place, whereas 75 hundredths has a 0 in the ones place. So we can compare that 1 1/3 is larger than 75 hundredths. But what happens when the numbers are so close together that you just don't know which number is larger? Well, in that case, you need to try to change your fraction into a decimal so that you can compare these two numbers. And remember, to change your fraction into a decimal, you're going to divide your numerator by your denominator. And when you go through the process and you end up dividing out, you will get your decimal amount.